And this is another thing that's also really dangerous for founders. And it comes back to the VC cycle. You so desperately want this to work. Like it has to work. You've told everyone it's going to work. You told your wife it's going to work. Your kids know you're carrying around coffee bags. Like it's got to work. So that desperation often turns into it not working, but you're just making it work.
Welcome to the Product Market Fit Show, brought to you by Mistral, a seed stage firm based in Canada. I'm Pablo. I'm a founder turned VC. My goal is to help early stage founders like you find product market fit. Dane, welcome to the show.
Hey, Pablo. I'm happy to be here.
So, right now you're the CEO of Odeko, company that was started in 2019. And just last month, you raised a $50 million Series D. But before we get into that story, the Odeko story, I wanted to kind of jump back, I guess at this point, like nearly, 20 years or so, when you were, I guess in 2007, you were the CEO of Squarespace. And Squarespace, obviously a very well-known company. Today it's about a $6 billion business, driving over $1 billion in top-line sales. But you joined as CEO in the really early days. Like the company was founded, if I'm not mistaken, in like 2003. So it was only a few years old, doing about a few million in revenue. Curious if you could go back to those days and just kind of give us the inside story on how, you found out about Squarespace back then and why you decided to join, just how that all played out.
So, most of the things I've built as a founder. In this scenario, I was driving another company and stumbled into Squarespace through a friend and met the founder at the time and now CEO, Anthony Castellana, who had that brilliant gift of being both an engineer and a designer at the most extreme caliber in both, as well as solving the product market fit dilemma by just being the customer. Like he built the first version just to satisfy his need.
Which was what, by the way? Like what was V1? Today Squarespace used to make, any type of website you want, but like what was the kind of key problem that he had that he was solving for?
Problem he had, and it was also similar when I joined up, was just blogging. Blogging at the time was an incredibly hard thing to do. You had to stand up your own server. You had to do quite a bit of work. And that was only to share, your ideas on things. He made a much easier system to get that done. And you could already see the design aesthetic that's lived on through the last decades in his tooling. And I think the way he tells the story is, he built this in his dorm room. And then one of his friends, who became a friend of both of us, Tristan, came in and was like, I'll give you $20 if I can build my own blog on it. And he was like, oh, all right, that sounds cool. And I met him a number of years later. He had moved to New York in a dorm scenario with some friends and had a little office. And I figured maybe we could pair up and try to do something more meaningful. For a while, it was him and I sitting in a room trying to figure out how we could expand this to serve more people's needs and kind of navigate that journey, which it's fun, as everybody out there knows.
Well, first of all, it's pretty crazy because it reminds me, so this company started in 2003. Another company called Shopify started in like 2004. Under a very, very similar situation where, Toby, the CEO, just wanted to sell snowboards online. So he creates this company to do so. People start knocking on his door like, hey, I also want to sell things online. And that became a $100 billion success. So I don't know. There's something there.
There is. And it's, there are many ways to go about finding your product guide. Being the customer yourself is one of the best, because especially if you can viscerally understand the desire and hold on to that as you grow. Like it's fantastic. There are a couple of blind spots that get created. I remember sitting with Anthony arguing over like improving the core module versus adding a calendar, which would have taken, hours versus days. And I think you see one version of the world, but being truthful to that almost always leads to a good fit because you yourself are that fit. And a lot of VCs, you not included, but a lot of investors are like, but the TAM is too small. You're just focused on blogs, or you're just focused on selling surfboards. Like, it's not, that tends to not actually be an effective long-term strategy, because once you build something that works for a customer, as in with Squarespace, like I think the big delta for us was we had these blogging components and we added a blank module, we added a photo module, which allowed you to really expand the use case. Originally it was for like photo blogging. And before you knew it, people were building, wedding sites and their pet stores and everything else on it, because utility was so strong in the core that these extensions made a lot of sense for everybody.
And how do you become CEO? Like, do you just go, okay, it's not, normal for somebody to just be like, hey, you come and join me as CEO. Did you try to like invest or buy the company, or did you tell them right off the bat, hey, like I'd be better off kind of leading this. You'll make more money. How did that happen?
I mean, he's wickedly smart, so there was no hope of buying the company. Although that was definitely on my mind at the time. It was actually an interesting journey. I love founders. I love startups. I spent my life trying to build tools, Squarespace and help Shopify, and always have been a facilitator of that. He looked like in a lot of ways a younger version of me. I felt like if I can't, get a big hunk of this, I could definitely help on the journey and share some of my scars. And it was interesting because it was just really him at the point. The final interview I had to become his CEO was his dad. He had coffee somewhere in the 20s. I remember, it was the last second I remember Anthony calling me. He's like, yeah, my dad says you're all right. So let's go for it. Like, all right, cool.
That's awesome. And so you ran that company, what was like 2 to 10 million, 2 to 15 million? Is that more or less kind of when you were there?
Yeah, it was that early arc. Don't remember exactly what he was doing at the time we joined up, but we'd raised $40 million during my time and had gotten to, I would think, a pretty meaningful product market fit. It was more than 10 million in a revenue standpoint. We found a number of inflections, both in product and in the way we went to market. I think that we continue to extend the utility of the platform, and we found ways to educate customers. One of the things that we ran into at the time was it was hard for customers to believe that you could actually design a tool inside of a tool. I mean, that sounds kind of obvious right now, but at the time it was you always hired an engineer, or, it was a long process. The fact that you could do it yourself was an educational sell. So we had to find long formats. And in truth, this format was one of our keystones to success. But we found podcasters, and that ability for someone to actually share their experience with it really helped people understand what it could do and open the category.
You're there till about 2011. How do you leave and end up starting another company? How do you leave a rocket ship like Squarespace to then go do it again from scratch?
Well, my North Star is just trying to help small business. Anthony is an incredible operator. And I think in our chapter together, he learned a ton. And I think the business when I left had really found its self-sense, right? It was going to be, and what did that thing become? It's the way to make beautiful things online and to tell your story in that kind of stunning fashion. And I want to roll the dice some more. So, went to the next one. And that is probably company 7 or 8 in the sequence. So I am very much akin to this startup. Start in a room with an idea. It's not the idea you're going to end up with, but it's an idea, and keep going.
Tell me just a bit about that company, SumAll. What was the idea there?
Well, we had seen this pretty demonstrative shift from the small business to start spending in digital from what was conventional advertising. And it felt at the time that Shopify was one of our earliest partners, and Facebook and Google had a huge amount of data that they couldn't get the attention to share with their customers. So actually, Toby and Harley and a bunch of those people were really early advocates as we kind of put together a platform that let the user see and understand their data. But it didn't work. The lesson I learned there, as hard as it was, and you do learn more from the ones that aren't the rocket ships, but that, struggled. We ended up with 500,000 small businesses. So we ended up with one of the larger platforms, but that data was very hard to action. So we got swept aside in this. And I think it's definitely a topic worth talking about. Like, our customers just absolutely loved it. They would spend hours a day. They would print out the reports and share it with their team. I think it was like 15 times Google Analytics usage was our usage case. And we're growing, 20,000 customers a month, which, having just come off Squarespace, was a big number to get to early in your life. It didn't correlate to people spending money. At the end of the day, we're like, okay, now everyone's using this. We want to start charging for, deeper analytics or printed reports. We're like, what's my data? Oh, am I going to pay for my data?
Do you think this is because something like Google Analytics is free, so there's that kind of benchmark? Because if you're getting value, presumably you would pay.
Yeah, I think it hit home understanding your customer cohort. In selling to the enterprise, as an example, it's easier for there to be a calculation of impact. Like, how is this data actually guiding decisions? How are we able to make real value out of it? And then you can attach a fee to it. A small business, and I've talked about this a lot, it's characteristically struggles to make those kind of calculations. Medium-sized business, because they don't have the time, it's hard to assess that impact, and there's a lot of falsehoods to it. So I think you're right, in part because some of the services out there were free, and the data inside Shopify was free. You could download it if you went through the hassle. Same thing for Facebook, same thing for that. So what was really the value of creating utility in that data? We knew from the functional side that it was huge, right? We knew that they were driving their business off with it, that they were guiding their decisions, that they were taking on our automations, which would create content for them. Like, all these things had effect. But as a small business, it was really hard to cross that chasm. And we did the having come from a pay model, which was Squarespace, I want to try a freemium model. And there are a lot of lessons in that kind of model where you getting the conversion from that to a paid system, it really is only 3 or 4% of your customers that will come over, which is tough.
Well, that's the hard part, is where do you draw the line? You need to let them in. You need to let them get actual value from your product, but you can't let them get so much value that it's never worth converting. And I find that's always the big place where at the early stages founders are struggling with, right? Like, what's that line? What's the feature that, like Slack is one that everybody understands. And I find it's such an obvious one, right? Is the history. Like at some point you kind of hit a message cap or you can't see your history or whatever. Okay. So if you're a serious user, you're going to pay for that. And if you're not, you're going to still get the value. Like it's just that perfect where it just works out. The nature of the product lets that happen. But that's not that simple in many other freemium cases where you kind of look at your features side by side and you're like, if I cut it here, no one's going to kind of use it. And if I cut it here, no one's going to pay, so it's a delicate balance.
It's hard now to actually say ego plays an even bigger part of that. Because one of the challenges in building capitalized businesses is that you really want to live into the promise you had with your investors and your team, and getting usage on freemium feels like you're winning. I've got actions. People are looking at analytics. They're printing reports. They're doing things. And everyone gets excited. Your board writes you bigger checks, like everybody's leaning in, but you're lying to yourself because you haven't closed that loop. The lesson that I learned from Squarespace, and I probably should have kept much closer to my heart, was we originally had, or during the cycle time, like a 30-day trial. So you build your site and everything else. And we quickly discovered that the length of the trial actually was inverse effective. The shorter we made the trial, the more customers converted. And the corollary to its successful conversion was actually number of modules. In this case, at the time I was there, how many different components to the site? What was your investment as a buyer that I made into the product would be a better threshold for conversion than anything else. So we started to engineer, how do we get people to upload content? How do you get people to really feel attached to it? And when which my next chapter, my ego or just the success I've had through life got in the way. I'm like, people are fully engaged. It's going to be an obvious conversion, right? So I think that something to keep in mind is when you're building these things, you really need to pressure test what is the feature you will pay for. And not, I think that rope is almost always better, tighter. Like people do give way too much, right? Very quickly when folks to the platform and they get the thesis or the vision behind the company, they'll decide, okay, I want to go in or I want to go out. Making them have a year and a half free and then, the third mail button costs money. It's incredibly hard. Because also the psychology is now this platform's free. Slack was brilliant because their strategy was less about the threshold, was about go-to-market muscle. Like they really found a way to get infection inside of corporate buyers through consumers.
Tell me more actually just on that Squarespace one, because I found that interesting. Why would letting somebody have a 30-day trial versus a 15-day trial actually lower conversions?
So the thing is, it's interesting because we had the same thing in Shopify, not we, but as part of that environment, they had found that much like we had 5 modules, when you had a customer make $25 off their website or something like that, then they would really feel fine paying the fees and going forward. Same thing for SumAll. We found that people put in 5 data feeds, so 5 different businesses, that we hit a critical value that they would even pay for it, right? Because it just hit that space. I think it's very, very hard if you're like trying to make a trial based off time to know where that psychological point is. In 30 days, in a lot of ways, someone would like get all excited. I'm gonna sell scarves online. And they would work on it for like 3 or 4 days, and then life would get in the way, and then a month later they get an email being like, hey, your website's up for, payment. They're like, oh, I'm going to go back to it in 3 months when I get a better break. But in that first 7 days, you're like, oh, is it working? I'm going to see it. I can visualize it. Actually, your mental attitude was the investment I'm making versus the time I've spent is high. Thusly, I can pay now because I can extrapolate a future. And customers who did pay obviously would end up feeling the commitment in that payment as a reinforcement of their energy, and usually put more energy in to get to be more successful. It became 14 days and 20 days and 30 days. There's definitely customers who would, continue to invest in that period, but a lot of people, just kind of got into like, this is going to always be here mentality and wouldn't convert. So statistically, and again, this is a while ago and a lot of things have changed in the world, but a couple companies that I help advise now have a similar pattern. You actually will see like a spike in decline, and it's a long tail too. A lot of those customers that wouldn't buy in 30 days would buy in 3 months because they come back and be like, oh, I want to do it. So like exactly what the threshold is difficult. Even as an operator, as a business, one of the things that makes this shorter trial really helpful is when you're trying to test what is driving conversion. If you think your cycle time is 30 days, your iterations are also in 30 days, right? So let's promote, in my day, we launched a WordPress importer. Sounds insane now, but you would move your WordPress content into Squarespace. Did that work? Because you couldn't tell for 30 days because people would just wait out the trial. So you're like, oh shit, we have to wait to see if that one will work before we introduce a new feature. Like having a short, trial window meant you could just try things and try things.
That's right. It's a tighter feedback loop. And it makes sense. You're almost like leveraging momentum. Like when somebody signs up, that's when their peak interest. Make it frictionless for them to get some value. And once they get some value, then, get them to pay. And then, like you said, now they've committed. So they're going to deploy more time into it. And you kind of get the positive flywheel spinning. I mean,
it's gyms, right? It's the whole thing. Like you want to, building habits takes energy. And you have to think about where you want to catch them in that cycle. Different businesses obviously have different cycle times, but I would say most of those folks out there in the early stage, especially as you want that iterations to be tight, don't get long trials if you can avoid it. Try to make that as quickly as you can. Because you also see if you actually have something people will pay for.
So let's jump now to Odeko, your current startup. I mean, in a sense, you stayed in this SMB world, right? So I get that kind of consistent theme. But I mean, you're going from like data analytics to coffee shops. How bridge that gap for me? How do you end up there?
Well, actually, I took back. We sold SumAll, and then we took part of the tech stack team. So we had this great partnership with Square, and Toast, and those folks. And we started out as geeks. Could we use that data that had usually been invisible inside the industry of brick and mortar? Because they have less technology, surprisingly, than a lot of other sellers or categories, and do something productive with it. We built this, and here's a great idea, failed product market fit. We built a predictive model. It used to be called machine learning loops. Now it's called AI because it's sexier. But it was very effective at understanding the future sales. So you go to a coffee shop, Joe, Cologne being early customers ours, and say, like, we know what you'll sell in a week. We can reshape your ordering behavior and your staffing and everything else to utilize that forecast. They loved the idea. They used it. It saved them waste. It made their business better, but it was a fraction of the problem. As we sat there with our customers, the vendors wouldn't deliver after we put the order in for them to deliver, or they would come in the middle of business, or they would have reconciliation problems and tons of invoices. And it's just like, or they would steal money. We were shocked because we were tracking the data, how systematic a lot of the industry is to be like, oh, these garbage bags are $18. And then 2 months, they're $23. But who's checking the invoice? It went to $23. And it was like obviously intentional because it happened to all of our customers, right? So it seemed that would be useful in of itself, but the real problem was that they needed infrastructure. And having had the experience of getting excited about software, able to break the VC pressure loop. It wasn't easy. It was super duper hard. Because again, like as a founder, you come to this thing often with, either an idea that you're fascinated by and you think the idea is it, or you've made a promise to your investors that you're going to deliver on the solution. We had sold some of our most amazing investors on the idea that we were going to bring AI to, an ancient industry and make them more efficient. And those would be a pure SaaS. Gross margins in the 80 percentile, everyone loves it.
Because you, just for background here, I mean, you raised like a $6 million pre-seed, I assume like at idea stage, just giving your background, and that was kind of the pitch you delivered?
Totally. We were very lucky in the quality of folks and the amount of money they bet on my gray hair, the eighth kind, and a lot of machine that I am. And that was the vision, and we'd gotten some really good test data that was having an impact. But it was having an impact that the customers didn't care about. And an evolution I've had along this journey was it is much easier to think of a customer, at least for me. And obviously there's lots of different ways to go about product. I have a friend who only can do things on spreadsheets, and that's how they figure out the product market fit. For me, if you pick the customer you care about, it makes it easier to look at the problem that you're solving is successful or not successful without that ownership. When you come into the startup and you're like, my idea is I'm going to make, hats red, you're screwed. If my idea is like people are getting wet, I need to solve it, you'll find a way to expand to what actually works. I love the idea, and I've owned coffee shops. Those people are such amazing humans trying to make their neighborhoods better. They're basically the founders that you guys deal with on a much smaller scale. They're trying to make a better world, and no one's helping them. So when we were sitting in a coffee shop a Birch down on Spruce Street, and the vendor walked in with a giant U-boat and disrupted everything. Or we're sitting at a coffee shop of Joe's, and the barista's like, I got to go. I love talking about the AI, but we're out of milk. The milk guy didn't show up, and I'm going to run to the deli. I'll be back in 20 and keep on talking. It's like, okay, this clearly is a bigger problem than the hat we're trying to invent for you. You need, a raincoat and an umbrella. You need like the whole thing.
Was that by design that you're in these coffee shops, by the way? Like, were you just there like watching, or you happened to be there on something else and you saw these things happen?
Again, there's a lot of different methodologies out there. For me, and this is something that, I've done through all the companies, Squarespace included, we had customers that we were friends with, and we answered tickets. I answered thousands of tickets. I think Anthony answered tens of thousands of tickets in his time there. You want to stay very close. I have a rule that I have to have coffee in a coffee shop every day, and I've got to talk to a customer every day, even now.
Every day. Wow.
Every day. In this industry, it's super easy. So it's not.
It's true, but it's still, I would have thought every week, you know what I mean? Like give yourself, but no, every day. Okay.
No, because a lot of the best companies out there, you can see they drift, right? They get fascinated. We've raised, 100 plus million. You get it. There's a whole different world that you get sucked into. And if you drift too far away, it's really hard to steer the North Star, which is at the scale, my primary job is to hold the vision for the company and try to make sure it still sees that future. But going back to like sitting in a coffee shop, and I suggest everyone out there who's starting to figure out the product, makes best friends of a number of their customers and gets a way to be really inside that experience in whatever visibility you have, whether it's watching the customers sparkle in the eye and sitting with them, or seeing how their metrics are playing out, or something that's being attached to that. A very important part of the process. We saw that our system wasn't the solve. It was just part of a bigger picture. And then had to convince everybody that we'd gone down the wrong road, which...
what was that like?
Horrible. It was rough. And I'm old. Like, it's not my first time. And actually all the advice our investors gave at the time was totally true. Like, they said, you're going to screw your multiple. And yeah, sure as hell, screw your multiple. No doubt about it. And like, we have trucks and drivers in 14 cities, and it's bananas, and it's tough. And they were like, it's going to be gnarly, and all these things that I think were right. But from my perspective and the company's perspective, and even people in the company were like, I didn't sign up to build software for a driver. I want to build AI predictive models. So even your internal culture was like, why are we swinging so far from this that it made sense? So
how many people were on the team more or less back then? Like 10, 15 or?
No, we're probably like 30 at that time. I've taken like 15 folks. Another benefit of being around the block is you can get a couple people to join in yet again. But we actually made this adjustment during COVID, which was super fun because our industry died simultaneously to figure out a big model. And the way I actually got the model through was just did it quietly, didn't make a big deal out of it, told the board I was thinking this worked, and I just went and got a truck, got a space with one of our customers. They gave me their keys, and I started driving around at night. And then we got a lot of other people, and a lot of our team actually helped. We used our office as a warehouse, and I think the team mentioned something. We carried like 10,000 gallons of oil up into our little office space because we'd run out at night.
So you decided to take over all of the supply logistics part of the back end, let's say, of running a coffee shop?
Yeah, because again, what we realized that coffee shops needed is that they wanted to be part of a franchise without being part of a franchise. They needed to have the same support that the manager at Dunkin's has or the manager at Starbucks has, with the fact that they actually care about their customer. And to do that, Dunkin's not running to the deli for milk, right? They got a truck that comes by and loads them up. And, again, the VCs try to protect us. They're like, oh, just use a 3PL. Do anything don't touch the truck.
Right.
It's
yes.
going to be hard.
Assets. No.
Oh my God, stay away. It's going to be really crazy. And then we had to buy companies and all things that scare the investor community along the way. But one of the things that's tricky for a founder, and this gets very hard too, because in my last company, I just banged my head on the same wall. So knowing when to push hard and be, persevere, and knowing when to switch is a delicate thing for founders. But in this case, my guidance soul is I knew when the coffee shop owner was walking to their store and they had a picture of their inventory and they didn't have to worry about an invoice stack sitting there and they didn't have to worry about doing deli runs, you could see the sparkle, which is my indicator.
And did you validate for yourself the economics and how it might look like at scale? Or did you just kind of put one foot in front of the other and say, like, this is what it takes to solve the problem. Let's see what happens.
I did, but that doesn't work. The problem with unit mechanics is in small companies, you can make it say anything you want. So like our really smart MBA team members, very easily drove it to like, you're going to need 2 drivers and you're going to need a bigger truck. And like, they just took my scrappy napkin math, which is about the limit of my brain power to get to, and they made it look like there's no way it's ever going to work. But like, I just called the guy who makes paper in Canada and he's going to sell it to me for 3 cents a cup. And the coffee shop's paying 17 cents a cup. So we should be able to offer to them for 12 and make a lot of money. Like, sure. But did you count for the cash flow unit? Like, it didn't work. In some miles, it didn't work. In some miles, it did. So like a lot of these things, you just have to do it, right? And that's one of the things that makes founders, I think, amazing. And same thing for the person who owns a coffee shop. There are many friends who told every single coffee shop owner, you're never going to make it work. Why are you opening a coffee shop? It's a horrible business. It's never going to happen, right? And something in their heart is like, I just want to see if I can make the world better. Same thing here. It's like, I'm pretty sure this could work. So I'm going to take the risk. I'm going to buy a bunch of stuff. We're going to carry it around the office. I'm going to drive it around at night, see if it does a difference. And this, having done this a long time, this was, and I also encourage companies now, because historically, I think the delta for success was smaller. There was so little technology in the ecosystem that you could make someone's life iteratively better. Now the threshold is you have to be an epic solve, particularly in small business. You can't walk into a small business and go, I'm going to save you 3% on your business. I don't care. I don't have time. Leave. What the hell are you doing, right? If you're a chain and stuff, that's obviously different. But at small business levels, you're not. You have to like change the outcome, to change their lives. And this was that for Odeko, which is why we were able to scale so quickly. Is that it was a life altering moment for our customers.
When did you realize that new model was working? Like, how far did you have to take the trucks and the warehouse and all the kind of hard asset side of it?
I think I knew it was going to work before anyone else. As everyone always jokes, like us founders, me included, are in the rowboat ahead of everyone else is in the fleet in the most dangerous position. I remember leaving our office and going to a train station, and I built a good relationship with our first core customers. And I called up Jeremy from Birch. I'm like, I've got a really stupid idea. What if you gave me your keys and I just loaded your store at night with everything at once? He's like, that would be amazing. It's like, oh, that is an inflection. I have not heard it.
Right.
You do tomorrow? Like, I'll give you the keys now. I was like, yeah, sure. Let's do it next week. That was the key. I think the way the model worked out with all of a sudden, once we drove around like 5 vendors into one truck, so our efficiencies that we'd had in one of our models of like, yeah, actually the delivery cost goes down 1/7 because you're just doing it in one drop. Your drop size getting better, your density is getting better. That worked. And then the buying power thing, we had no estimation for. We had a few phone calls to vendors in the background, but all of a sudden we're like, oh, we're buying 100 million of this stuff. We're getting it at the scale of a Starbucks. It allows us to have a healthy model and give back to a lot of the shops. So it became pretty clear, even at those first weeks, that it was going to work. And this is another thing that's also really dangerous for founders. And it comes back to that VC cycle. You so desperately want this to work. Like, it has to work. You've told everyone it's going to work. You told your wife it's going to work. Your kids know you're carrying around coffee bags. Like, it's got to work. So that desperation often turns into it not working, but you're just making it work. You're just charismaing the shit out of it. You're convincing one customer, like you're like force of nature. When something really works, it actually just works. Like, we went from 50 to 10,000 customers in like 2 years. Like,
wow,
it just worked. Same thing as Squarespace. I mean, and this is a credit to the tech and the infrastructure. We all could have just gone to a beach and that thing would have just kept on growing and kept on printing out money. Same thing for SumAll, even though it didn't make the money. The model worked. People would sign up all day long, right? And you could take yourself as a founder out of the equation and see the numbers indicating that there is actually success there. Then you really have got it. But it's very easy to get stuck in a loop that requires very hard to scale components.
On the Odeko side, I mean, one of the questions that comes to mind is, what are you doing so differently is on the logistics side than others were? Because one of the things I've seen over the last few years, 2021 happened, there's just a lot of money in the system. There's a lot of plays out there that kind of had this mix of tech plus normal business, traditional business. And a lot of times it was like, look, we're tech enabled. So like, we're going to do it more efficiently. We're going to do better. And it turns out actually the businesses they were trying to replace were doing it quite well. Like, it was just really hard to do it much better than that. And a lot of those kind of models didn't work. In your case, I assume you're doing things more efficiently or just better, or what is it that you've really innovated on?
It's actually a lot of different wins. We had a better model most of the industry is focused horizontally. We're focused vertically. So they're trying to service any kind of food space with their delivery or their tech. We were very focused on one, which allowed for insane SKU concentration, simplicity of application that it fit them. Two, we were all geeks. So our driver app we built from scratch, our warehouse tools from scratch. It means there is 99.5% delivery success rate, which in industry sits in the 80s. So our tech made that work better. We also are not assholes as much as, that seems like a simple thing, but it's actually a big thing. So we've been able to combine. Operators have been building those small distributors, meaningful distributors for 20 years and know, as you said, how to make it work. And we're making good money and running it, joined our family. We got people from Amazon and Pepsi who had done this at great scale. And we have folks from Squarespace and Quidsy and other places who, if they all listen to each other, and that's not an easy thing, and it's something that we always did work on, but that combination of different skill sets allows you to not assume that the old businesses were idiots, because they're absolutely not. And I can tell you how many idiotic things I've done. I filled trucks with milk that have blown up on the highway, and they're like, you can't do that. Milk weighs a lot. You can't split your deliveries. Like there's so many things that you just need to experience for, right? Like we bought a business in Denver and customers were coming up at the door knocking on it. I'm like, why are there customers at the door? It's scary. And they're like, because they're doing a craft fair. I'm like, oh, we need a marketplace to handle pickup at the warehouse. That's a crazy idea. It's in New York. That would be like, what are you doing? But the rest of the world, that's like getting those feedback loops where everyone's kind of sharing, oh, wow, driver app, the driver should be able to get rewarded and metrics for like hitting things and throw orders at each other and have fun. Like all those different pieces together make for an actually more effective solution for the customer and for us. We didn't invent, a new atom or a graphene or something. We just got a lot of different thinking, a better model, and then better tech at it.
Walk me through like landing the first, 10, 20 customers, because one of the things that I'm thinking about is, you mentioned this before, like these days, you don't want to go in and sell something that's like make you 3% better, 10% better. The flip side is when you sell those sort of things, the kind of barrier to try it out is pretty low. Sure, the value might not be that high, but it's like, yeah, whatever, I'll try it. In your case, you're going in and being like, let me handle all your operations. Forget about your distributors, forget about all your stuff. Like, I'm going to take over. Okay, yeah, if it works, that sounds great, but that's a big risk. So how do you get those first few customers to jump all in with you? Or how did you structure it back then to maybe lower that barrier?
I think there's a split in that world. You need some customers that you are friends with, confidants with, and can express things. You then need some customers who don't know you at all, who you can sell without your personal input to see how they actually react. Those first set of customers are stupidly important. And I heard one of the other podcasts, a founder saying that they just paid them money to use the product. We do very much the same. We have it at every company. We've given advisor shares out for every company I've ever been for those first customers to be engaged. Well, I'll literally walk their dogs and spend.
No way. Is that real?
Yes. And be there, show that we care. Like we won one of our first customers. We screwed up and didn't put the order in for pastries. So I went and cleaned out all the other bakeries and then brought the pastry. Luckily, having run into the owners walking in with all the replacement pastries. And they're like, okay, these guys they really wanted to work. Like those customers, I have them still as friends from the last 5 companies, and the friends I made here are really valuable and I hope to have going on. And then you have the customers right afterwards, which is like, just see if the solution sells itself. And it actually doesn't auto sell in the way that I thought it would. The way I thought it would auto sell is like, people be like, it's amazing. I'm going to get rid of everything. I'm just going to move on to you because I'm going to save money everywhere. And no, they're like, are you sure this works? Like, really? Nah, you're going to steal stuff, right? Or something's going to happen. Like, or there's going to be a technology service fee for $2,000 that I get billed like 6 months later. Like there's got to be a gotcha. So the customers would, move over 2 vendors and watch us. And then they move over 3 vendors and watch us and 4 vendors and watch us. And they had a different behavior than I expected, but it still had that impact, right? And so it ended up selling itself. Like the thing that we thought would sell to was the technology on its own. Nope. You give them an amazing portal, like don't have to go through 300 invoices, have it all consolidated here, know where you're spending your money. Nah. But when you go in, you're like, the Oatly's cheaper. Oh yeah? Cool. And then when they're using the technology, like, oh, it's super easy. And like, it works out great. And I love the portal. Can you add this button to make this, like, they love it afterwards. But
why do you think that is?
It's unrealistic to expect, someone who's holding the whole world together with their own time and energy to figure out the returns. And if you're telling the truth, every So many people pitch small business. It's absurd. Like they literally get piles of emails and mails and everything a day being like, I'll save you this and you do that. And everyone thinks it's all lies. I still have small businesses and I think all those spams are lies. Right? How would you? But when someone says, I can get rid of this bill from the IRS, okay. If you actually can, okay. I can make your Oatly cheaper, okay. Because it's an instant return, right? No, there's no long-term calculations, no inference that a large enterprise can actually spend the time to figure out. Small businesses can't. So I'm always encouraging, like when you develop your model, to try to find out how it is replacement of existing cost or something very provable so the business doesn't feel like they're exposed in the risk and that you've taken that on yourself.
The other way I've heard kind of this expressed is, you want to meet customers where they are. And the reality is, if you think about the average coffee shop owner, are they thinking about putting all of their invoices in one system to see them all? Not really, but are they thinking about something they bought yesterday that they wished was 5% or 10% cheaper? Or are they thinking about switching vendors? Yeah, they are. So when you speak that language, you're right away talking about something that, like you said, kind of clicks. It's top of mind. It's the language they already get. You can save me 10%, 20%, and it won't affect quality. Bit of a no-brainer. Let's go, right? And then the other value kind of is why they stay, but they see that later.
Yeah, 100%. A small business doesn't know how to factor their time. They don't know how to calculate all that in. If you come at them with an extrapolated return, it's unintelligible. And you come at them getting rid of the problem they have in a way they can access, because most people go into small business, particularly coffee shops and ice cream shops and the customers we have, because they want to make people's lives richer. They want to make the community richer. They want to spend time with the customer and their staff and inventing the next ice cream or the next kind of thing. Don't want to, be worrying about their supply lines and their choices. But they can't make, to them, that's all just muddle. And it's an ugly muddle they want to deal with. If it's cheaper and I know I'm saving money, I now take that $5 I saved in that Oatly and I put it into my kid's college fund, or I, replace the light bulbs in the bathroom, right? Like I can instantly get a return off that.
Before we close here, I want to touch on one more story that you'd mentioned earlier, and maybe you can walk us through it. But my understanding is there's a point at which you kind of maybe overhired or just hired a lot of kind of junior, more interns, and kind of used them to fix a lot of different things that weren't working all that well.
Potentially better now because the capital has gotten much more constricted, but it's certainly a red flag as a technology company. What happened to me in this scenario was we were scaling, and this is even the AI chapter, and I walked by one of the conference rooms and there was like 9 people in there, all hammering away. They'd had to hire interns to fill in orders and get things clarified and right. That was shit balls. First, we're burning money. We're solving a problem with money, right? We're like literally duct taping the world over with money, which is very hard not to do when you have a lot of money, as any kind of human being. And second, there's something fundamentally wrong with a solution when you're trying to make, everything automated and successful, and you default into this kind of process. That means that you're culturally.
When was this, by the way? And like, where were you in your journey? Like, how many people? How much did you raise at this point?
We probably raised another 10 million at that point, and we were but still small, maybe 30-person, 40-person team. Because we came out of COVID with 15-person team because we didn't know if the industry was going to be around. And we started with 50 customers in 2020 and had 600 by the end of the year. It's mind-boggling. But at that point, actually, we didn't have interns. We'd used COVID to build technology, and we kind of saw our mistakes from a year back when we were trying to do all pure tech. I think a lot of, I will say this for operators, it's tough as a founder. You get to some imposter thesis, right? Like, why am I here? And that also affects the way you make decisions. And sometimes you get swayed by your team. I would encourage, whenever your instincts feel like something's wrong, because sometimes that's all you're going to have is your instinct, is that you not, aggressively scream at people and all the rest, but you ask questions, you try to figure things out, because those little nicks add up and they weigh you down as a business. You have to kind of get on things as fast as you can as an operator.
Let's end it there. Well, let's end it on the 2 questions that we always end on. The first one is, and this is for Odeko specifically, when did you know that you had true product market fit?
I think that empirically you could see it in the growth data. Sales without a sales engine, sales without marketing, just sales because the product made sense. That had an inflection rate that was obvious. I viscerally thought that we went to a coffee conference. I was wearing a Odeko t-shirt, and I don't think I got around 10 feet before I got my first hug or making a difference to somebody. And I got, I have my Squarespace t-shirts and I'll still get oh, I made my site. It's so cool. But when someone's actually now making money in their business, it was, okay, this is not bad for use of lifespan, but it's different for everybody. I would say don't use funding, don't use hiring, don't use your pretty box as your symptoms of success. Those are all number of employees, worst one possible. It really should be something where you can feel the impact.
Number of employees, it's funny. That was one of those. I me's vanity KPIs and there's vanity KPIs. And that's, and especially I remember as a first time founder being like, oh my God, we made this hire, we made that hire. It's just, you're not chasing the right things. But just to your point earlier, walking around that conference and having people hugging you, you have to be a founder to experience this feeling. But for me, the kind of most rewarding feeling of being a founder is having an idea and seeing it transform into real life. And obviously that idea changes, but there's a point at which it was just an idea and because you were involved and you were the leader of that. And then to see it actually happening in real life, that feeling is second to none.
Everyone listening, this is the first time in history that you can have an idea, and in a number of years, humanity has felt it across the globe, in your community, on your street corner. The fact that it's possible to invent and change the world, it is the most addictive applause you could ever have. It's almost unimaginable. Something in your head years later is a living thing making the world different. Freaking awesome.
And so the last question here is, and especially for you, having done as many startups as you did, being part of so many journeys, what would be some of your kind of most important, most common advice for early stage founders that are right now kind of in the trenches seeking, trying to find, let's say, product market fit?
There's a lot to that. I kind of keep a journal, but I'd say for the early stage founder, understanding their own why they're there, who they're trying to help, what they could see the world as, because that will help provide the fuel source, because it is a gnarly, as you know, it's such a hard job. It teaches you so much. It offers so much reflection, opportunity to grow, but you need a source of fuel. And the more you continuously connect to, I want to make that person's life better, or I want to make the planet better, or whatever it may be, actually more you will fuel yourself and thusly the people around you and thusly your customers. And it can get lost. Or sometimes it's not always bad, but I've known plenty of founders I want to be rich. It's actually not the worst thing. There are plenty of rich people who want to be rich, and that's how they got rich. But then just be honest with it, right? I'm here to whatever it is, try to find that center to yourself. It really does work in the long term.
Perfect. Well, we'll stop it there. Dane, thanks so much for being on the show. It was an amazing episode.
Thanks, Noah. Yeah, I really enjoyed it. And thanks for doing these kind of things. They help the world.
If you listen to this episode and the show and you like it, I have a huge favor to ask for you. Well, it's actually a really small favor, but it has huge impact. But whichever app you're listening to this episode on, take it out, go to Product Market Fit Show, and leave a review, please. It's going to help. It's not just going to help me, to be clear. It's going to help other founders discover this show, because the algorithms, whether it's Spotify, whether it's Apple, whether it's any other podcast player, one of the big things they look at is frequency of reviews. It's quantity of reviews. And the reality is, if all of you listening right now left reviews, we would have thousands of reviews. So please take literally a minute, even if you're just writing great podcast or I love this podcast, whatever it is, just write a few words. Obviously, the longer the better, the more detailed the better, but write anything, leave 5 stars, and you will be helping me, but most importantly, many other founders just like you discover the show. Thank you.